Hi and welcome to another story. If you're enjoying Dob Entertainment and want even more, then check out my Patreon channel, patreon.com/James Dobinson. Link in the description. There you'll find full audiobooks for Harry Potter, The Hunger Games, Lord of the Rings, Roald Dahl, David Walliams and many more being added all the time. Thanks for your support as always. Let's get into the story. Hi and welcome to another story, and today we have the final part of Animalcolm by David Baddiel, continuing from part 4, chapter 44, begins with M. "Hello, Mr. Barrington," said Jackie. "Oh, hello, Mrs. Stone," said Mr. Barrington. No, Mrs. Stone is Fred and Ellie's mum. That's her over there," said Jackie. "Where?" "Over there, with the large, the well-proportioned, the bigger-than-average, husband." "Oh, yes, very good." To be fair to Mr. Barrington, it was quite hard to see who was who. The bus had only just stopped outside the school gates, with a huge creak of the handbrake, and every child in Year 6 had piled out at once. Now all the parents were trying to pick up their child at the same time, and it was getting dark. Said Jackie, "Where's Malcolm?" "Malcolm? Yes," said Mr. Barrington, looking around. "He's, where is he? Here! Hello!" "Hello, Morris," said Jackie. "I beg your pardon," said Mr. Barrington. "That's Morris Fawcett." "Oh," said Mr. Barrington, looking at Morris. "Wait a minute. Didn't I give you my phone? When—" He turned away from Morris to Jackie. "You called to speak to your son a couple of days ago." "You said that was my mum," said Morris. "Well, yes, I did, but clearly it wasn't. Couldn't you tell?" "Nah." Morris nodded towards Jackie, whose face had become very concerned. "She called me M." "Right. Is that what your mum calls you as well?" said Mr. Barrington. "No, but—" And here Morris frowned, as if a great and long thought was involved in what he was going to say next. "She might do, because my name, it begins—" His eyes went down and his lips moved, as if spelling it out in his head, and then he looked up again. "With M in it?" Morris smiled, pleased with himself. For a second Mr. Barrington smiled too, pleased that Morris had understood something. But it was literally for a second before he went white with fear on hearing Jackie scream, "Mr. Barrington, where is Malcolm?" Chapter 45. Free Cheese. "No," said Jackie tearfully, driving back and speaking on her hands-free phone. "They don't know." "Well, how can that be?" said Stuart. "I don't know." "Well, look, darling, I've called the farm, and, well, they don't know where he is either." Oh, said Jackie. "But the very nice man there said they think he must just have missed the bus, because he went out playing in the fields or something and forgot the time. They're going to look for him now." Jackie, by this time, had reached Kendall Road and was parking the car. "He offered me some free cheese too," said Stuart. "Sounded quite nice." "Never mind free cheese," said Jackie. "I think we should call the police." "No, darling, let's just wait and see. They've said it's happened before, a kid missing the bus." "Well," said Jackie, slamming the car door and opening the front gate. "OK, but if they get back to us and say they can't find him, then I'm phoning 999 straight away and—" "Oh!" "What is it?" "Come outside quickly." Chapter 46. Very, very faintly. The whole family stood silently on the front garden path, looking up at Malcolm's bedroom window, where, as far as they could see, Chinny the chinchilla was unconscious on a ledge. "How did he get out?" said Stuart. "Do you think it was the cats?" "Might have been," said Grandpa. "They might have dragged him out through the bars of his cage, like in the war." "Dad," said Stuart, "can you shut up about the war? You weren't even alive during it." "Fair enough," said Grandpa. "He wasn't in his cage," said Libby. Last thing I saw, he was running around the room." "Well," said Stuart, going into the house, "I'll go and get him off the window ledge." "This is terrible," said Jackie. "Can I?" "No, Bert, you can't." Jackie paused and looked down. "It's terrible because it's an omen," she said, saying the word omen very ominously. "Don't you see? Chinny was Malcolm's pet, and now," she began to cry, "Malcolm's gone missing." "Jackie," said Grandpa, "we don't know if he's gone missing. If the chinchilla's dead, then it might mean that Malcolm is... She was interrupted by the loud sound from above Stuart's voice. "Hold on a minute," he shouted. They all looked up. Stuart had opened the window and was bending over the chinchilla. "He's not dead. I can see him breathing, very, very faintly." The rest of the family, still standing in the front garden, took this in. Jackie nodded. Her face acquired a determined look. "Right," she said. "Libby, get a box." "Where are we going?" said Libby. "To the vet's." "But it's Sunday," said Stuart. "I'm the receptionist. I've got the keys and Rodney's home number. He owes me for working there for a pittance for 20 years. And with that, she headed back towards the car. Once they were all in the car and on the way to the vet's, with the unconscious chinchilla in a box on Bert's knees, the Bailey family were very focused. They were going to save the chinchilla. It was probably good they were so focused, because that mission might have got confused. They might even have turned the car around and stopped it if they'd noticed, staring out of Malcolm's bedroom window, watching them leave, another very similar-looking Andean Lanegera chinchilla. Chapter 47. 72 hours. The Baileys had been sitting in the waiting room at Braden's veterinary surgery for nearly 3 hours. The clock on the wall said 10:45 p.m. Jackie was resting on her husband's shoulder. "I really think," whispered Stuart, "that you should go home." "Who's you?" said Jackie, waking. "All of you," he said, looking around. Grandpa and Libby and Bert were all there as well, sleeping on chairs, underneath pictures of cats and dogs and hamsters. "I think they want to be here," she said. Stuart looked at the door at the end of the room, the door where the surgery was. How long did Rodney say he thought it would take? Jackie shrugged. He wasn't sure. The injuries are bad, and Chinny's a very small creature. "I know. He said he would do his best." "Yes," said Stuart, "and if there's one thing we know about Rodney, it's that he likes a chance to show off what a great vet he is." Jackie nodded. She took her phone out of her coat and peered at the screen. There were no messages on it. "Have you heard anything from the farm?" she said. "Yes, I just got a text." She sat up, turning to him. "And they've called off the search. For tonight." Jackie stood up, her teeth clenched. "Right. Time to call the police." Stuart looked very worried. He glanced around, making sure the other members of the family were asleep. "Jackie," he whispered, "I already have called the police." Jackie went white. "You have? What did they say?" "They said normally they don't put any kind of police search in place until someone has been missing for 72 hours. 3 days? "Yes. They said a lot of boys of Malcolm's age run away for a bit and then just turn up." Jackie took a deep breath. She picked up her coat. "Let's go to the farm. I want to check myself." "No, darling." "Why not?" "Because he might be making his way back somehow, hitchhiking, or on a bus or a train, and so it's better for us to be here for him. What if we find out he's made it to the city, but then we're miles away in the country?" Jackie shook her head, defeated. She folded her coat and sat back down next to her husband. He said, "The police?" "Yes. They said to get back to them tomorrow if there was no news." Jackie shut her eyes. "I feel so awful, Stuart." "I know, darling," he replied. "No, I don't just mean because I'm so worried. Also because almost the last thing that happened with Malcolm before he went off on that trip was us all laughing at him because of the monkey moment." Stuart frowned. "Jackie," he said, "you mustn't. I can't bear it. I can't bear that he's out there somewhere and his last memory of us is that. Especially me. I'm his mum." Softly, she started to cry. "I shouldn't have laughed." "Jackie," said Stuart, putting his arm around her and folding her crying face into his chest. "Malcolm's going to be okay. I know he is." He said it very confidently, but his face didn't quite go with his words. Chapter 48. Here we go. Next thing she knew, Jackie Bailey was having a dream. It was a dream in which there were lots of animals and lots of children, some of which were her children and some of which weren't, and the children and the animals kept on getting mixed up, and the children were chasing the animals, but then the animals were chasing the children, and all she could hear was quacking and mooing and barking and meowing. And then she woke up and realised that Bert was not sleeping anymore. He had got hold of Stuart's phone and was pressing all the icons on Animal SFX over and over again. "Bert," she said sleepily, "can you stop that, please?" But before Bert did stop it, Rodney Braden came out of the surgery. "Hello, Jackie," he said quietly. "Oh, Mr. B," said Jackie. "Sorry, I must have fallen asleep. What time is it?" Mr. Braden looked up at the clock. "Just turned 5 a.m. "Oh, thank you so much for working this late. It's so good of you." "It is good of me, yes." "So," said Jackie after an awkward pause, "how is he?" As Jackie said this, slightly louder and more insistently than perhaps she meant to, all the others began to stir. "Well," said Rodney, smiling, his special "what a great vet I am" smile, "perhaps you all should come and see." He took the Bailey family over to the surgery. "OK, here we go." And he began to open the door. Chapter 49. Cock-a-doodle-doo. On the other side of the door, lying on a tiny operating table, the chinchilla's eyes began to open. This awakening wasn't quite like all the others in the story, though. He'd been under an anaesthetic, which had put him really fast asleep, so as he came around he was a little confused. Images went through his mind, of many different animals, and of many different places, but one thing kept coming back to him. It was quite hard for his waking mind to place it, but it seemed to be a goat, and the goat seemed to be saying something about how he had to make sure that he ended up next to an animal he really loved, and who loved him. that this was how he would become what he was meant to be. Then suddenly he heard a noise. Cock-a-doodle-doo! And then again. Cock-a-doodle-doo! The chinchilla felt frightened. He looked up. He seemed to be in an operating theatre. So why? Was he hearing a cockerel? And then he thought of something with horror. The third crow of the cockerel. Time had run out. This was it. He was going to be forever whatever animal he saw next. But then, even through his fear, something struck him. That crow didn't sound like any cockerel that he had sounded in the last few days. In the last few days, when he'd been an animal, he had understood the crow. He knew the cockerel had actually been telling the other animals to wake up. Cock-a-doodle-doo was just how humans heard it, which must mean... He looked around as the door opened. It all seemed to be happening in slow motion. Then he heard a human voice, a woman's, say, "Bert, can you stop doing that?" "But I've never pressed that one before. The big chicken with the silly rubber glove on his head." "Yes, I know, Bert, but not now." And then he saw that coming through the door was an animal he really liked. A number of animals he really liked. Loved, in fact, and who loved him. Just as K-Pax had told him he had to find. It was his family, because humans, of course, are animals. We're just apes who walk upright, wear clothes, and don't throw poo around quite as much. "Now," said Rodney, blocking the family from coming in straight away, "I should warn you, this was a very complicated operation. It stretched me to the fullest. I had to use all my surgical talents." "Yes, we get that," said Stuart, trying to squeeze past him, but Rodney wasn't having it. "He'll make a full recovery, but he'll be groggy for a while. Might not seem quite like his old self, at least to begin with." "No, we understand that," said Grandpa, also trying to get past him. "I just want you to be prepared for every eventuality." "We are prepared, Rodney," said Jackie, with some edge in her voice. "OK," said Rodney, stepping out of the way quickly, sounding a tiny bit frightened of Jackie, and letting them see the patient, who was lying quite uncomfortably now on the tiny operating table. He was lying quite uncomfortably because he was suddenly much too big for it. And it was true. The chinchilla did not look at all like his old self, or rather in a way he did. He looked like who he actually was, and always had been, an 11-year-old boy called Malcolm Bailey. Everyone, including Rodney, looked astonished. "Hello, Mum." "Hello, Dad," said Malcolm weakly. "Well," said Rodney, "even I wasn't prepared for that eventuality." Chapter 50. Where's the Chinchilla? After everyone had finished hugging Malcolm, and after everyone had finished kissing him, Stuart said, "What are you doing here? What happened?" Malcolm thought for a moment, and then he said, "I was on the school bus, Mum, when you came to pick me up." "What?" said Jackie. "Yes, but I was hiding. I stayed on, behind one of the seats at the back." "Why?" "For a joke, but it went on a bit too long, and I didn't realise you'd gone away, and then when I came out, everyone had gone." "Oh." "So then I came home. I walked from school, but when I got back, you weren't there, and I didn't have a key." "Oh, yes, Jackie, we rushed here, didn't we? With Chinny, of course. So I walked around for ages looking for you, and then eventually I saw our car here, parked around the back. So I came in through the rear door, found myself in this room, and Chinny was on the table." "Malcolm," said Jackie, "you shouldn't have done that. Stayed on the bus, I mean. I was calling you and calling you." "Yes, I'm really sorry," he said. His mum shook her head, trying to stay cross, but then her face melted, and she rushed to hug him again. "Oh, well, as long as you're safe and sound," she said. Said Rodney. "Where's the chinchilla?" From under the table, Malcolm picked up a red box. It was the box they'd used to bring Chinny to the vet's yesterday evening. "He's in here," said Malcolm. "I put him in." "Right, can I have a look at him?" "No," said Malcolm, swerving the box away from him. "I want to take him straight home." "Really, Malcolm?" said the vet. "I should check how he's doing." "He's fine." "Well, actually, he is fine. I know he's fine, remarkably fine, actually, and I was rather hoping to reveal that to your family in a kind of dramatic way by opening the door and showing them their newly healthy chinchilla. I was looking forward to it. Well, you've stolen my thunder now, but still, I'd like to just... "I want to take him straight home," said Malcolm intensely. "He's had a terrible experience, and he needs to be back in his cage." Malcolm turned to his mum and dad. "'Cause he's my pet, and I love him." "You do," said Jackie. "Do you?" said Stuart. "Yes," said Malcolm. Jackie and Stuart turned to each other. Tears were in their eyes. "Please, Rodney," said Jackie. "I'll bring the chinchilla in first thing tomorrow for you to have a look at, but please let Malcolm take him home now." Rodney looked a bit unhappy, but nodded. Chapter 51. Not normal circumstances. When they got home, Malcolm went straight up to his room. He opened the door and rushed over to the chinchilla cage. He took off the top of the box, opened the door of the cage, and then shut it again. and then turned around to see his family coming into his room. "Oh," said his mum, "Chinny looks amazing." "He looks so well," said his dad, "like he'd never even left his room." "Yes, exactly like he did before. Mr. Braden is clearly an amazing vet," said Malcolm. "Yes," said Jackie, "he could probably operate on people." "Well, I don't know about that," said Stuart. "I do," said Malcolm. Stuart frowned, but then Jackie said, "OK, everyone, it's been a very tiring day and night." She checked her watch. 5:30 a.m. Time definitely for bed. 10 minutes later, after he'd brushed his teeth and put his pyjamas on, Malcolm looked up at his parents from his bed. They looked back at him, their faces full of love and relief. In the corner of his bedroom, Chinny was running on his wheel. "Will that stop you getting to sleep?" said Stuart. "We can take the wheel out if so." "No," said Malcolm. "I like the sound of it." "So," said Jackie, "we haven't even asked. Did you have a nice time on the farm?" Malcolm closed his eyes. "Yes, I did. I really did. Thanks so much for sending me." "And," said Stuart carefully, "that thing you said at the vet's, is that true?" "Which bit?" said Malcolm. "About the chinchilla, when you said, 'He's my pet and I love him.'" Malcolm opened his eyes again. He was glad that that had been his dad's answer, because not everything he had said at the vet's had been true. When he'd woken up from the anaesthetic and discovered he was a boy again, which was only 2 seconds before his family had come in and seen him on the operating table, Malcolm had to think very quickly. He had thought very quickly and decided very quickly to make up the thing about staying on the bus and pretend that he had put Chinny into the box, because Chinny wasn't there, had never been there. Chinny had been looking out of Malcolm's bedroom window the whole time. Malcolm wasn't a boy given to making up things, but in this particular case, he decided there was no point in trying to tell his family what had actually happened. They just wouldn't believe him. No one, he knew, would ever believe him. He knew he shouldn't lie under normal circumstances, but these were not normal circumstances. And one part of it had not been a lie. The last and most important part. The part that his dad was asking him about now. It would have been a lie only 3 days ago, but now he could feel how true it was. "No, Dad, I do really love Chinny." And just to reiterate that, he turned to the tiny creature who'd stopped running for a second on his little wheel and said, "Ti amo, Chinny." At which point Chinny seemed almost to nod, almost to smile, and then just started running as fast as he could, making that wheel spin for dear life. "In fact," said Malcolm, "I love all animals." Stuart and Jackie turned to each other with tears in their eyes again, but smiles on their faces too. "TATUFTB," said a voice in the doorway. Everyone looked around. It was Grandpa. "What does that mean?" said Libby, poking her head around the door with a toothbrush in her mouth. "That's a turn up for the books," said Grandpa. First coda, 1 week later. Next Sunday morning, Malcolm insisted that they get to the zoo as early as possible, as well as obviously insisting on coming himself for the first time for years. They were the first people through the gates. Malcolm said hello to Sanjit and Luke, who looked confused because he said it as if he'd met them before. Then they were in the zoo proper. Stuart said, "So, where would you like to go first, Malcolm? Lions? Tigers? Reptile house? Insect house?" "I'd like to go to the petting zoo, please." Stuart looked surprised. The petting zoo? Wasn't that a bit babyish? But said, "OK." Stuart was even more surprised that after they got there, Malcolm wanted to stay at the petting zoo for so long. But he did seem really happy, being able to stand right inside the pen and stroke all the animals in there. Then Stuart checked his watch and said, "Listen, Malcolm." "Malk is fine, Dad." "Is it?" said Jackie. "Yes, Mum." "Well, anyway," said his dad, "we want to go and see the chimps. I know you might not want to do that after the monkey, Chimps are apes, not monkeys, Dad." "Are they?" "Yes, and I'll join you there in a bit." "Oh, OK, you sure?" "Yep, just make sure you, especially Bert, stand back a bit from the bars." Stuart nodded. "Right you are," he said. And they went. Malcolm watched them go. Then he looked around. No one else was in the petting zoo. Well, no other humans. So even though there were a lot of other animals in there, and he wasn't entirely sure if his ones were the ones he thought they were, Malcolm said, "Ludwig, Mabel, Zaza, Trotsky, Benny, Bionita, Snowflake, Dolly, Dolly, Dolly. Listen, I can't remember if all of you understand human, but I just want to say, firstly, I've told the keepers here where you're from. They didn't believe me at first, but then they rang the farm to check, and would you believe it, a cat, a dog, 2 pigs, a white horse, 3 sheep and a pair of tortoises were missing. So you'll all soon be going back to Orwell Farm, where I think you'll be happier. And secondly, I just wanted to say thank you for bringing me back to my family, for saving me from my own cats, and just for teaching me how amazing animals are." Malcolm looked up. None of the animals seemed to be doing anything or reacting. He felt a little sad about this. Maybe they didn't understand human after all. Or maybe the whole thing hadn't actually happened. Maybe he'd fallen asleep in front of a goat pen, or maybe even just on the bus back and dreamt it all. "Anyway," he said, turning to go, "I love you all. I really love you all." As he said this, a cat, a dog, 2 pigs, a white horse, 3 sheep and a pair of tortoises emerged from all the other animals and surrounded him, rubbing and stroking themselves against him. Malcolm smiled. He really, really smiled. As the cat purred, the dog wagged its tail, the pigs grunted happily, the horse neighed, and the sheep baaed. Oh, and the tortoises made weird squeaky noises from quite far away. Second coda, 1 year later. "What are you doing in there?" said Mr. Barrington. "Come on, it's time for bed." Mr. Barrington was concerned. Last year on this trip to Orwell Farm, people had gone missing for a small amount of time, and he held himself responsible. He was absolutely insistent that this wasn't going to happen again. So this time, every night of the week, he'd stayed up to check that all of Year 6 had gone into the farmhouse at the end of the day. Then, after checking the rooms, he'd walked through all the barns and all the animal pens to make sure there were no children not safely in bed. He had felt terrible about that boy. Matthew, was it Michael, who had disappeared briefly before? Even if he had turned up safe and sound eventually. And now, wouldn't you believe it, there again appeared to be a boy not in his bed. In the goat pen, in fact. It was quite dark in there, and Mr. Barrington was aware that his eyesight was not of the best. It had got worse since last year, and he was tired from doing this very thing every night. But those eyes definitely seemed human, didn't they? Mr. Barrington opened the pen gate and went in. He thought, looking down. Bit muddy to go any further. He squinted into the dark. Yes, those were definitely 2 eyes, looking at him. Quite large eyes. And he couldn't quite make out the colour. Brown? Amber? But he felt sure it was a boy or a girl. It couldn't possibly have been an animal, looking at him that keenly. Those eyes knew who he was. There was no doubt about that. "Come on now, I know you might think you've got into trouble for staying out, but we'll discuss that in the morning," said Mr. Barrington. By Mr. Barrington's standards, that was fairly lenient talk. He even said it in what he thought was a gentle, friendly voice. But still the eyes kept on staring at him. "Look, I really don't want to have to come in there and get you," he said, which he didn't. He could feel his nice patent leather shoes, the ones Mrs. Barrington said really suited him, sinking into the mud. He decided to try a different tack. "Look, we all love the animals. We all want to spend more time with them. This may sound silly, but sometimes at the end of the day, I look out on the farm at the sheep and the cows and the horses grazing, and I think how wonderful it would be to like them. To be an animal, with no money worries, no books to mark, no difficult pupils to make behave." Mr. Barrington was warming to his theme now and starting himself to believe it. Not a care, really, in the world. Must be a wonderful life. But the truth is, he was about to say that. The truth was that, obviously, we can't become animals, just because it looks nice and because as humans we'll always be curious about how they think. We have to buckle up and get on with our own lives. And right now, that means coming out of the dark and coming with me back to the farmhouse. He was about to say that, very clearly, and he was sure that his speech would bring whoever was hiding in the goat pen out, and then everyone would be accounted for. What happened instead was that he felt very, very sleepy. It was late, and he was, as we know, tired, and somehow, while looking at those deep amber eyes, the ones that seemed to know who he was, and belonged to someone who was, clearly listening and understanding him, the tiredness increased. So he said, "Obviously we can't become No." And that was as far as Mr. Barrington got before he fell asleep, face down in the mud. There was a pause of about 10 seconds while the amber eyes watched and blinked, and then K-Pax came out of the dark, sniffed at the head of the strange human, already changing into something furry, and went back into the dark. And that is the end of Animalcolm by David Baddiel. Really hope you enjoyed that story. I'll be back soon with lots more stories and videos coming soon on my channel. If you'd like to subscribe or hit a like, that's always appreciated. Thanks for listening, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.